It's the worst of the CBC for October 7th, 2019, the show where I watch the CBC so you don't have to. Now, today's CBC was a lot better than previous weeks. Now, it's mostly because they weren't covering as much as previous weeks, and we'll go over how they are still fake news by omission. And the reason they sort of didn't do a lot of terrible things is because they're covering the lead up to their debate tonight, and they own the debate, so they want to really hype it. And it's really hard to be biased when you cover a pre-game show of something, but they managed to do it, and it's standard fake news by omission. And this is the fact that none of the anchors brought up. They didn't ham on the fact that this is the only English language debate that Justin Trudeau's accepted, that he ran away from 2 other English languages debates. And the reason why this is important is because if you remember the 2015 election, they were hammering Stephen Harper, and the media heavily went out of their way to portray, and even would sort of jingle with the facts to make it look like Stephen Harper was being evasive and afraid of his record. When you look at the numbers, Stephen Harper actually falls in the dead center of historical prime ministers of like answering questions, so he's pretty average on this thing. Justin Trudeau is on the lower end. He's one of the more evasive prime ministers we've had. So the fact that they didn't outright say, they showed a clip of Andrew Scheer saying it, but the fact that they didn't say, well, what does it say about Justin Trudeau that this is the only debate he's accepted? Because not a lot of people follow the news. They look at this. It's a very important thing that Justin Trudeau only accepted 1 debate out of the 3. That doesn't really bode well for his image, but they don't cover it that way. Now, it was about half an hour of coverage, and they did the standard thing of bringing on 3 different analysts to so that was kind of useless. Then they covered the sort of climate protests going on now. This is my new favorite thing the left does, the die-ins. The die-ins to raise awareness, where people just lie on the floor like they're idiots. And like, this will change the world. Clean up something. You want to raise awareness? Say, oh, climate activists have cleaned up this. It's Trump supporters have cleaned up Baltimore. Now, they get no recognition because they're Trump supporters. But still, can you imagine if they were set an example? But this is what the modern left is. I just want to lie on the floor until the government... I want to lie on the floor so we give the government unlimited power to fix the world for us. It's nonsense. Okay, now, another thing I'm going to cover so this is where the biggest omission falls in and worst covered, is the story of Trump pulling out troops from Syria. Now, I am actually very much against this move, and I'm going to agree with where the media stands today on this. But the only reason the media is with me today is because it is the position Trump is not taking. So he's withdrawing troops from Syria, even though for the last week Turkey's been building up. And Turkey has explicitly stated they're preparing for an operation in northern Syria. They're going to hammer the Kurds. The Turks are going to kill the Kurds, and they're not going to fight ISIS. They're going to enable radical Islam. But here we finally have CBC mentioning, oh, this might empower Iran in the region. That might lead to Iran. I've been saying this for years, and the CBC's pretended like Iran's the good guys in the region. It's only when President Trump takes moves that don't counter Iran to well, what about Iran? And so I understand the Trump people saying, well, when Obama did this, they pretended it was a great thing. Yes, when Obama withdrew troops from Iraq, the CBC and the global news media said Obama ends the war in Iraq. He didn't. He ended up creating ISIS, creating a power vacuum, and then had to go back into Iraq. And here, when Trump withdraws troops from Syria, it's reckless, it's a dangerous move. The difference is they should have been covering Obama harsher and not Trump more lenient. So it's sort of, it's not really fake news, but this is just bias, where they show no principles. And the fact that, they're covering these environmental protests and now they're bringing up Iran. Well, for the last week, Iranian forces, the the security forces in Iraq, which are basically Iranian controlled, have promised they're going to defeat this coup. Like, the people have been rising up against the Iranian incursion into Iraq, the fact that the Iranian government controls the Iraqi government. And dozens of people have been killed, right? This hasn't gotten any coverage, right? Because Iran's behind it. But now we can talk about Iran because Trump's taking the troops out of Syria. And for all that Trump knows what he's doing, no, he doesn't know what he's doing here. He's just trying to fulfill a naive campaign promise. He's doing the exact same thing Obama did. So if you think Trump is a genius here, you have to say Obama was a genius for doing the exact same thing. Because he's going to do the same thing, and the same result's going to happen. It's going to be just as bad as when Obama did it, okay? I know they're different people, but if they do the same thing, it will probably get the same results. And Obama was not a genius for doing this, even though the media portrayed him to be one. He ended up being abjectly wrong about this, and his foreign policy was an abject failure. And Trump, doing the same thing as Obama, will have the same results. So you hope he kind of backpedals and keeps some troops in Syria, because, and Lindsey Graham got this right, if you do not back the Kurds, if you let the Turks slaughter the Kurds, who's going to be an American ally, right? There's no one will want to ally with the Americans if they're seen as a consistent promise breaker. If you always break promises to your allies, and this is what the Kurds are going to be, if you break the promise to the Kurds, no one's going to ally with you in the future against the fight in radical Islam. They're going to say, well, the Muslims are crazy, but, America can't be trusted. So if we back America, we're going to go down anyway. So you can't leave the Kurds behind. And if you think Iran is the threat, but like if the Islamic Republic were to fall, Turkey will be under Erdogan, will be the new exporter of the Muslim Brotherhood agenda and radical Islam. So this is a foolish move. And I get why Trump supporters are angry at the media for covering it like this, because they treated Obama like Jesus when he did this, but Obama was wrong, and he'll be wrong for the same reasons Trump is wrong for doing this. So hopefully this is one of those things where Trump says, well, we're not doing a full withdrawal, and then sort of backpedals a week later into a sensible position. I would enjoy that. But all in all, okay. So before we give the Rosemary Barden rating, there was one point in the CBC that's going to take 2 Rosemary Barden points off of today. I'm going to give it a passing grade today because they covered the wage gap. And I was like, wage gap. But they covered the fact that the wage gap is decreasing over the last 2 decades. It's like, okay, whatever. And then they did a whole thing on the wage gap or whatever. And then at the end of the thing, they said, and the 2 primary causes for the wage gap are women's preferences to go into lower paying industries and women's tendency to work part-time. Thank you. The entire wage gap can be explained those 2 things. The wage gap is basically, it compares a part-time McDonald's worker who's a woman to a male doctor who works 75 hours a week, right? Obviously, they're going to make different amounts of money, but if you just look at the raw data there's a wage gap. So thank you, CBC, for actually explaining that. So I'm going to knock 2 points off. What is a 6 out of 10 becomes a 4 out of 10, becomes a passing day for the news. So 4 out of 10, the Rosemary Barden scale, but I will have to look at Rosemary Barden's face tonight. Ugh, Rosemary Barden. So if you're going to be around tonight after the debates, I will be doing a post-game show live on my page. So I'll see you then. Have a good day.